you. Well, I think we've run out of gas. I've been noticing that and wondering about it. There was a very small meeting 2 weeks ago, and last week there was just no energy, and this week it's small. I think this book is too long, and we need to find a better way to reach more people. Let's continue tonight, but I think maybe we'll take a break and pick up again after a pause or something, get some new energy or revamp it or something. So we begin the chapter on rising to mystical consciousness. There's a lot of stuff here about techniques. Let's see how far we get and see what it feels like at the end. We'll start. Let's just go around and we'll see where we get. Jump in with questions on any of these, because there's lots of, we can talk at great length on any one of these topics. Maybe that's what we ought to do, is take a break for a while and then come back and spend a night on each topic or something from now on or something. But let's go ahead tonight. We can do the meditation and see what it's like. Please.
Practicing the letter of truth. Joel says that the primary reason for practicing spiritual healing is not to rid people of some malady. Bringing temporary relief spiritually is not significantly different from a medical solution to the problem. If, however, the person who has a healing is able to maintain some of the spiritual altitude that she or he was lifted to, that's a step up. Another reason for healing work is that it's a carrot. It demonstrates the power of truth and leads some to want an understanding of the principles by which they were healed. But the most important benefit of practicing healing work comes to the practitioner. Practicing the healing principles every time we're tempted to accept the picture presented by human consciousness is the spiritual practice that will make the principles part of our consciousness rather than remaining the letter of truth in our intellect.
He's very clear about that. And I know we haven't. One of the topics in the next chapter is healing. I think we might want to spend some funky time on that, but the Infinite Way message was originally primarily one of spiritual healing. Joel was given the ability to heal, and he was actually a Christian Science healer from 1930 until he wrote the Infinite Way in 1945 and 46. And the real reason that the Infinite Way went worldwide so fast and grew to 70,000 students is, without any advertising, is the word of mouth reporting the success of the healing practice. And he was at the height of his practice healing an average of 135 people a day. So the work was a healing work. But there's a couple of tapes that I've heard that some of us are going through, and he's really very clear about that. Healing a person spiritually and healing them surgically or medicinally are actually no different. If the only result is that the person gets well, who cares how they get well? And in fact, when there's a spiritual healing, the reason the healing takes place is that the person is lifted in consciousness to the level where the disharmony can't maintain itself. So there is a spiritual lifting, but if they just then don't do anything, the client will just slide back to where they were. This is what the old thing about Jesus used to always say, go and sin no more. And it doesn't mean sin in the Baptist church sense. What that means is go and give up the error in your thinking that resulted in the disease to begin with, okay? But of course nobody did that, and what's not never discussed in the Bible is that Lazarus probably died the next year because he was an old man, and we don't know if the lepers got leprosy again, and we don't know if the boy that he raised from the dead stayed. We have no idea what happened to these people. Chances are that the majority of them were sick again shortly. So there's not a whole lot of value in doing spiritual healings, except it is a clear demonstration of the truth of the teaching. But the real benefit comes to the practitioner, because the practitioner will, whenever they're called, go within and review the principles of spiritual healing and lift themselves to the altitude of consciousness that the other person will be lifted by them. Okay? The way the healing happens is that we raise ourselves to a sufficient height of consciousness that the other people who have associated themselves with us are lifted up to that point. Okay? And that's how the healing works. And so somebody calls Joe to get a headache, Joel to get a headache healed, okay? And they get the headache healed, and they get lifted once, okay? And then they wander back down, and they get have some other problem, 6 months later, and call them again. But that same day, Joel went that high 134 more times, okay? So guess who's getting the benefit? Joel went to that altitude 135 times a day on the average, and in fact he did it so long that he just stayed there. He just lived there, so he didn't have to do anything. So the real advantage of practicing spiritual healing, which really means practicing the letter of truth, is to look at situations that represent disharmony, that appear disharmonious, and know the truth about it, and go within, and you don't need to worry about healing them, but if you're seeing disharmony, you need healing. So you go within and look at your own consciousness and lift yourself until you see the truth. And it's that repetitiveness, that work, that changes the pointing at the moon to realizing the moon. Okay? So that's what the Infinite Way was really all about. He was trying to develop practitioners, but he was trying to develop practitioners for their sake, not because he felt the need to try to heal the world.
Heal yourself.
Mm-hmm. If you can. There's a fundamental problem with trying to heal yourself, is that upon recognizing the fact that you need healing, you've accepted the lie. Whereas if you call a practitioner, they can come in not accepting your lie. You call me up and say, I'm having a heart attack, and how are you? I got a headache. You call me and say, I got a headache. See, now the reason you called is you're convinced you have a headache, so you have a long way to go to lift yourself to the point where that's not true, okay? But if you call me and say you've got a headache, and my response is that so? Not to you. I say, okay, I'll be right. But to myself, I say, is that so? Is that the truth? Is there such a thing as a headache? Is it possible? And do that work, see? So it's easier to work with other people.
Yeah, I have a physical ailment that doctors, they shrug their shoulders, the neurologists, they say that I have this thing, and it's been an ongoing thing since I was born. Mm-hmm. And if I would ask for healing and this was removed, I don't know if I would slip that, because that would be like people say, well, there's no proof of God because I can't see it. But that would be, for me, if this was healed, if this would go away, literally, that would be enough for me to completely know it.
That would certainly prove the principles, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, And
that's the carrot.
Huh?
That's why it's a carrot.
Yeah, that would certainly prove the principles.
I wouldn't even understand it even perhaps, but I would know that there's something that I don't understand that's true.
And yet, if you did nothing beyond that point, you would wander around in human consciousness and watch the news in the morning and read the newspaper and read the editorial paper and watch a few soap operas and do stuff like that, and you would be right back down in it. You would get sucked down so fast if you're not doing daily work that you would be amazed at how quickly you'd be. You would be able to remember the truth that you knew that was true, but it wouldn't affect your life unless you practiced it on a daily basis. And his point is that knowing the letter of truth is the necessary first step, because you've got to know the letter of truth to practice the letter of truth, but the way you're going to get a realized consciousness is not by somebody healing you, it's by your practicing the letter of truth until you can do it. And when you can do it, then you're beginning to have a realized consciousness. Okay? That's the point. That's his point. I mean, there are 6.8 billion of them out there now, convinced that that truth you just recognized is a lie. And you're in that consciousness, and this is the stuff we've been through in this book up till now. You're in that consciousness, you're immersed in that consciousness. It's radiating at you 24/7, 52, and it comes into you subliminally. Even if you're not reading the newspaper and watching the news in the morning and stuff like that, it's still coming into you subliminally because there's only one consciousness, and you are actually connected to that consciousness. And so if your mind is not actively on God and the letter of truth and work, it's by default over here getting diluted by human consciousness. And that's the dilemma. That's why there are so few people that get out. The numbers are worse than I thought when I wrote this book. Have you read Hawkins' count on the number of enlightened people?
He was like 4 Christianity and
But
that's not even enlightened.
No. Yeah, I mean, people who are 600 are really high on the scale of 1,000, but 700, there are only 22. 700 is enlightenment, okay? And there are only 22 people in the world who have a 700. And 12 of them have 800. Yeah, okay? 4 of them have 900, and 1 of them has a 990, okay? And that's of the 6.8 billion, So the default is 6.8 billion minus 22. 6.7 billion. Yeah. I mean, the human consciousness is pretty low, and it's dragging you down. So that's his point, and that's why you practice. You practice knowing the truth. You don't ever. Ideal practice is don't ever see a disharmony without labeling it correctly. If you see anybody that's sick or in lack or whatever, go within and understand what the truth is. Lift yourself to where you can drop all concern about it.
I just want to share this because you and I talked a little bit about this. I'm trying to get clarity on this. When I had a really painful experience last week, I had just a thing that I was in excruciating pain. And I called Lee and Dolphy for help. And Lee and I talked about this because I was in such pain. He asked me, he said, well, did you call to have the pain removed? It was like, yeah. And you told me that wasn't what the healing was about. If I was calling to have the pain removed, that I was still in that consciousness that there was something wrong. The difficulty
was something wrong. Yes.
It was me in a place like that is it's very hard to even get to the level of knowing that you're in there at all. Does that make sense?
I'm sure one of the reasons that Joel had such a high healing rate, when Joel was healing, he had like an 80%, 85% success rate in healing, okay? One of the reasons is that there were, 300,000 Christian Science members of the Church of Christian Science, and spiritual healing, or mental healing as most of Christian Science healing really was a profession. I mean, like you went to the Christian Science practitioner and paid your bucks and got your healing, It's like going to the doctor and getting your aspirin on. You went to the Christian Science, and such like. And these people were doing it and doing it and doing it again, and they get their healings or not. And of course, the height wasn't nearly as high as Joel, so the success rate wasn't nearly as good. But the point is, if you're those people, the consciousness of the country then was that people knew they were going to a practitioner to get lifted. Okay? And if you're going to a spiritual healer wanting to have the pain removed, you've got the same problem that you have in healing yourself. You're accepted the pain as a reality.
How do you get beyond? That's a hard place to get that.
That needs to be removed.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
What you want to do for better results is to want to be lifted to the point where you can see that the pain is not real.
So that work you do when you're not in pain then?
Mm-hmm.
That's the work you do, because when you're in pain, I mean, all I want is morphine when I'm in pain. But
that's not true. What you really want to do is wake up.
Yeah.
You don't want
But to me, at that point, I associated waking up with being pain-free.
No.
And that's the catch.
No, you don't. You're not thinking about that. All you're doing is wanting the pain to go away. And instead, you would realize that you're in a dream, and what you want to do is wake up. If instead you would, if you would, buried yourself in this work sufficiently, then when you had a pain, what you would want to be is lifted above pain, to where you could see that the pain was a dream. Okay? That would improve your chances of healing.
So that's something you practice. For me, it would be something to practice, which I think I do, but obviously not to the extent that it works yet.
Well, no, the reason I'm making that point to you is the reason I'm making that point to you is the next time you have a pain, you'll go this way, because you'll remember this conversation. So this is a specific teaching to you to get you to change next time you have a problem, whatever it is. Realize that you will remember this, and the pain wasn't enough to obliterate your ability to think. You just hadn't thought about this before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that wasn't something you thought about, and now you think about it. And that's all I wanted you to do, is think about it.
Okay.
So if I call for healing, instead of asking for, I'm in pain, please heal me, I don't even have to mention any illness. I can just say, help me see the truth.
Mm-hmm. Or you can say, I'm in some pain, would you lift me to where I can see the truth? Or I need lifting is a fine thing to say. Whatever it is you want to say.
It doesn't really matter if it's depression or...
Not really. Joel talks a lot in his healing stuff about needing to know the correct letter of truth, but then he gave that all up towards the end of his practice. In fact, he gave it up in 55, and then he talked about it again in 57 and 59, and then he gave it up again in 63. So it's not necessary that the practitioner know what your problem is. Mm-hmm. But, usually you would let the practitioner know whether you're working on a physical thing or an abundance thing or something like that. You might, but it's not necessary, certainly, for the practitioner to know what it is. But, a few people call me, and I have totally different levels of success with different people. Dulcie always gets her healing immediately, because she expects to be healed immediately. And nobody else, I don't have that anywhere close to that kind of record with anybody else. With everybody else, I'm still floundering and practicing, and I'm really grateful for all the calls, because it allows me to practice the letter of truth. The more calls I get, the more work I get to do. I'm the one that gets all the advantages here. I get to all 3 meditations every week, and I get to both workshops and the class every week. I get to do 6 times as much work as most of you. So, and if people call, I get to do all that work too. So it's my advantage to be there. But I know that I get healings from Dulcie, and she gets healings from me. But Dulcie and I have a long history, and the other thing is that when Dulcie and I get together, we both get higher and higher. For some reason, we both lift each other. With no intent. It's very high around here when Dulcie's here. And I always feel very high when Dulcie comes here, but the reason she comes here to do her work is because she gets so high here. And therefore, we both know it works. We have the proof.
What usually comes out of my mouth is, I've got a little appearance going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Knowing that it's an appearance and wanting to be lived out of.
Yeah.
Receive the truth.
Yeah. And I usually work on a day or so on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it persists,
and that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine because that's muscle building.
Right.
That's the muscle building. Working on yourself is fine.
When I start to get frustrated, I call.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the other thing that that's part of the discipline is having called for help, don't keep checking to see if it's gone yet. Because that's giving it reality, okay? And there's a bunch of other stuff going on, there's a bunch of, there's kid works involved and everything else. Your kid's giving you the problem and your kid is probably clinging to it, and there's all that sort of stuff going on too, so. And that's another topic we'll do healing another day, but the point I'm trying to make tonight is how strong Joel was about the fact that it's the practicing, the practicing in the sense of being a practitioner, that is what converts the letter of truth into the realization of truth. And you can be a practitioner, should be a practitioner if you want to realize truth, whether you're ever called or not. Because you're continually confronted with appearances that you can either buy or know the truth about. Okay? That's what this very short paragraph is about.
Sure. With the increase in population, does that seem as if the deck is stacked against us in digging our way out of this? Or is that an illusion?
Well, the deck certainly is not stacked against us. It is certainly true that everybody gets out because the reality is that nobody's in. Okay? So, I don't know, when you said, is that just an illusion? The whole thing is just an illusion. The fact is everybody is out. So there's no question about it. But the Leelaa is a play about everybody about all the individual consciousnesses going from amoeba to transcendental consciousness. And yeah, they all do.
But it's harder because of the increase in population, the greater number of negativity.
But the consciousness is rising too. The human consciousness is higher now than it was 100 years ago. There's more of them, but the average human consciousness is higher now. And we don't have inquisitions, Spanish inquisitions anymore. Much. There's lots of stuff which is very commonplace isn't in our consciousness, isn't accepted in human consciousness anymore. Slavery is just about gone. Colonialism is just about gone. Certainly, serfdom and that sort of stuff is just about gone. All those things are just about gone.
We still do a lot of not nice things.
We sure do. We're still at a very low point on that yardstick, but we're at a higher point than we were. And all of humanity is at a higher point. When we talk about getting out, we're talking about trying to accelerate ourselves and clear out from the average humanity. But the average of humanity is rising, and all of humanity is going to get to 1,000. It's going to get to transcendental consciousness. And then we may do it all together, slowly, or occasionally somebody gets struck enlightened. But you don't need to be one of the 22 to have a really good life. There's an awful lot of joy at 500, like that. There's a lot of people at 500.
It's exponential, too. I mean, if there's only a couple right now, and then if instead of 22, there's 22 million, there must be a speedy process of changing the consciousness. It must put a rift in the you know what I'm trying to say? If it's the more people that are enlightened, the faster the process.
Yeah, we would agree with that. But the point is that there's not more people that are enlightened, is what he's saying. 22 out of 6.8 billion is not more people enlightened. But there are a lot more people who are in the 600s. There are, my experience, and it may just be that I'm more aware of them because of my consciousness. But, there are lots more people around now who have a fairly clear level, who are quite clear in the sense of 500 and above, and we find people teaching all over the place. There's 10 serious infinite way teachers that Joel listed, and none of them would be 700s, but Yeah.
And if you just think about all the 12-step programs, just people in those are higher than the average
Certainly,
person walking around, and they have grown all over the world in the last 50 years. So,
and those people get lifted quite a bit from
where they were the day before.
They get, if you look at Alcoholics Anonymous, people who are in an unsolvable problem of alcoholism get lifted above the problem, right? I mean, they get lifted there. And notice, by the way, that when people stop going to meetings, they go out and get drunk. You need to go to meetings to stay lifted. Okay, that's the process I'm talking about. Human consciousness will grind you down if you're not in the AA consciousness. But there's a clear demonstration that consciousness can lift you out of the seemingly hopeless disease, seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It works. And I came in with no intention to get sober. Absolutely no intention to get sober. And I came in to the meeting at the old club, and I came in drunk. And I saw the truth and went home and poured out a bottle of scotch. Now, tell me, what was that, huh? I mean, I got the message that it worked, and I got the message that it was hope for me, and my denial and repression got eliminated, and I went home and poured out a bottle of scotch, and it was inconceivable. 5 minutes before I walked in that meeting that could have happened. So that's the power of consciousness, and I was lifted above, and the problem was dissolved. The disharmony was removed. It was an illusion in my head, and nothing had changed, except that I was no longer addicted to alcohol. Nothing had changed. So there's your demonstration. So you're right. I mean, that certainly is lifting the world, and it's growing. It's moving into so many areas now. That whatever you're addicted to, whatever problem you have, the group consciousness can be high enough to lift you out of it if there's no single person who's high enough to lift you out of it.
You ran across AA, the biggest peace movement in the world.
Sure. That's pretty incredible. It's an incredible movement. Let's move on. Let's do meditation, because we all know about meditation.
Meditation. Joel tells us that the fundamental tool is meditation. He introduced a specific step-by-step formula for the West, which he called contemplative meditation. First, we need to have some statements that remind us of the letter of truth that we have been learning. For him, they were quotations from Scripture because he had their truth revealed to him. For us, Scripture isn't necessarily an authority, so we have to find others. But whatever statements bring truth to us will do.
Off the page.
We take one of these pointers as truth into our consciousness and contemplate it. We just think about it, think what it means, let our intellect play with it, and explore it. Soon we'll begin to have new thoughts about the truth that we're playing with. To the extent that we have any sort of a window open through our lap to ourselves, more truth will come to us. After a few minutes of contemplation, we may have a realization or a feeling of acceptance or a deeper understanding. Then there's often a window during which our minds are quiet. Maybe just for a second or two or 5, maybe for a minute, there's a period of quiet.
This is the beginning of making contact with ourselves, of having a conscious realization of what is. During the moment of silence, we adopt an attitude of listening, waiting quietly to feel the presence or hear the still small voice. We're using the letter of truth, trying to open a little pipe out through our molasses to ourselves to get some more truth, to get a better sense of truth, until we get into a place just for this moment of peace. And in that peace, we listen. The listening is what Joel calls prayer. Let's deal with vocabulary for a moment. The word meditation is commonly used both for the practice, meditating, and the state of consciousness it leads to. Joel uses the term contemplative meditation to talk about the practice, and the word prayer to talk about that moment of silence. For most people, prayer is a loaded word that has to do with asking God to think. So we'll use the phrase sitting in the silence instead. We'll use a variety of specific names from contemplative meditation to Vipassana for the practices.
The important thing is to get silent and receptive. Every time we get silent, even for a second or two, and listening, we are increasing our ability to feel the presence of what is.
It is ourselves that have brought us to this work. The reason we're led to books like this is ourselves are bringing us to the next piece of information we need on our spiritual path. What we're really doing is listening to ourselves, trying to hear ourselves, trying to drop this personal sense of self, the costume and mask that we're wearing. It's usually far better in the beginning to hold 20, 30-second practices a day, in which we pause, remember the presence of what is in our life, and listen, go within. That's a total of 10 minutes a day. Then to meditate for an hour in the morning. Probably 55 minutes of that hour will be wasted with mind chatter. Remembering who we really are 20 times a day is much more effective in building our spiritual muscle.
There are really two practices here. First, contemplative meditation is contemplating truth until the mind grows silent. We're listening for as long as the mind is silent, and then getting up and going about our business. This is a good way to begin and end our day. Second, practicing the presence is pausing frequently throughout the day to go within. We can develop tricks to remember to go within. For example, we can use walking out the door to remind ourselves to go within. So the presence of what is, rather than universal human belief, will determine our experience as we go out into the world. When the phone rings, we could go within for a second before we answer it to remember that an expression of what is on the phone, not a human being. When we get into the car, we might pause just for a second and reach for the presence, and remember who's driving all the cars on the freeway, including ours. This will bring out a much better experience than driving with a bunch of humans who are not paying attention, or who are on their cell phones or drunk. The freeway flows much better if what is driving all vehicles, which it is if we realize it, and which it isn't if you don't.
So is that all clear? Joel's big practice is contemplative meditation. And it really means just exactly that, contemplating about something until your mind gets quiet. And the whole point of any spiritual practice is to get yourself to get your mind to be quiet, and let your mind get silent.
Isn't it? Now, this is an author he said that peace of mind is a contradiction in terms. That peace of mind doesn't exist. It's more like you end up in a place where you're observing the mind and you're in a place which might be quiet because you're watching the parade. Or is it that the actual mind, the actual human consciousness just quiets down, or the body turns?
There can be no thoughts in the mind, is what Joel is attempting to achieve, and which is achievable.
So the human consciousness can actually be put on pause.
Well, I don't know what's going on up there, but I don't hear. There are no thoughts in my mind. My mind doesn't think. As a result of, when I'm successful in one of these practices, it arrives at the state where my mind doesn't think for a moment or two. And anybody who practices, if you do in fact practice the contemplative meditation, you will, after a period of time, start noticing gaps in your thinking. Cracks between the words. You'll start noticing gaps between your words. And I always say this too, between the words is the silence, And the way you also talk, he just drawls on so slow and everything, and you start hearing the gaps, and that gap, the pause between the words is the silence. You can hear it, and you think I'm about to say that next word. So that pause is silence. The problem is that if I'm talking like that and with pauses between the words, you can hear them and then we go on, immediately to the next word, and so you continue to be entertained. Whereas if it's your own mind that gets quiet, and then it gets quiet, the next thought pops up, right? But my experience is, and I did not achieve the silence through contemplative meditation, because for me that's a very hard one, because I have a very strong intellect and a very smart intellect, and it can chew on something for hours, It's not a 5-minute process for me. I chew on something for hours, But what I can do is withdraw all my energy from the thinking, which is what Hermosa was talking about, to the extent that I'm the witness, whenever a thought happens, I can not feed it, give it none of my energy, not think it's a good thought, not think it's a bad thought, not get excited about it, not try to push it away, any activity I take in response to the thought gives the thought energy, gives my mind energy, and sustains it. And the fact is that if I just ignore everything my mind says, it just gets quiet. And that's the way that I achieve the silence. And that's really what he's talking about when he says that. When Osho uses the word mind, he's using, we're making a distinction between mind as the activity or the function of consciousness within which thoughts and manifestation happens. And we use the word intellect for the rational process that goes on, that creates words and things like that. And Osho is using the word mind to include intellect. And he's essentially saying that, the quiet intellect is a contradiction, because, if you're in your intellect, the definition of intellect is that is the rational sequence of thoughts. If it's quiet, it's not your intellect. It's silence. So that's what he means by that. You have to be careful about words like mind. The infinite way, Joel uses mind very specifically. Joel and Barbara use it very specifically, which is why we talked about it at some length here. We're using it to mean the function of consciousness, the creative function of consciousness within which words and pictures and sounds and all that sort of stuff can be manifested. Yes?
So isn't it in the clouds when the healing takes place, or is it the different for?
The healing takes place in the presence. And I'm making a little distinction here because I don't know what the presence feels like for you, but when you're aware of the way the practitioner gets to the healing is by lifting himself or herself to the level where they're experiencing the presence of God. It's the presence of God that does the healing, If I can lift myself high enough that I'm feeling the presence of God, then that lie can't sustain itself in my consciousness. And if you've associated yourself with me and get lifted up there too, then it works for you too. But I don't know whether your sense of the presence, to me, the awareness of I am is the presence. And the awareness of and I am is God as. Okay? And the awareness of I am, of God ising, of God being. The awareness of ising is to me is what I mean by the presence. And the silence to me is behind all that. And it's the void, and it's not functioning even. It's what Doris Carver calls the womb of creation. It's that from which it all sprang. But it's void and not functioning itself, It's the source of it all. I guess the Christian call that the Godhead. But the presence is a step down from that, actually, to me. So I use those. I have a different experience when I'm experiencing the presence from when I'm in the silence. Okay? And healing is presence to me.
Is one way to recognize when you're, my experience is during meditation, is that suddenly I'm back. Suddenly I'm awareness, I'm back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I know I've experienced the silence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you feel that I'll say, bring your awareness back to the room.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. Suddenly I'm aware that my awareness is back in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel rejuvenated, I feel enlivened, I feel a different experience from being aware of presence.
Right, because when you're aware of the presence, you're aware of the presence.
Aware, yes.
Yes.
And the other is there's no awareness.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can be aware of the silence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The awareness is still there, but that's, in fact, whenever we get to the awareness exercise, we'll play with that. We'll do the whole night on the awareness exercise, we'll play with that. But, I can be aware of the presence and I can be aware of the silence. And both are two different experiences. And but when I'm aware of the silence, in both cases, the one that's aware is not the personal sense. Okay? I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say that I'm aware of the presence. I would say, here it is. That's what you hear me say that. Here it is. And that happened last night, on class this afternoon. Here's the silence, So we go yesterday afternoon in class. All of a sudden, the silence dropped in. I'm very aware of the fact that the silence dropped in. There was time to shut up. 5 minutes before the class was over. And the silence dropped in, and so I said, all right, the silence is here, let's get quiet. So we did. And then I felt a lot of presence. Okay, so it went the other way that time. I hadn't thought about it, but then I felt a lot of presence. So something was happening for us during the last 3 minutes of that class. That's why that meditation went a little bit longer than usual, because, when I feel the silence like that, and I'm being told to shut up, the reason, and that usually means that something wants to happen, and then I feel the presence, and it feels like a lot of energy.
Energy, that's what I was going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
When you're aware of the presence, there's some sensation of energy.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be a distinguishing between.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's definitely present. There's no question. Something's here. There is presence. Okay. But it's not Lee. It's the 5 senses don't detect that. It's not, although it feels like it. Although it gets translated. If you think about it, it gets translated into 5 sense terms. I would say my skin buzzes. That's what happened to me when I was with Robert. I was walking into the presence of Robert, and I wouldn't feel anything, and then I'd leave and I'd be driving home. It was away from Hollywood, so I'd drive all the way home. And every cell in my skin was vibrating very fast. You know, it felt like when I was riding on a motorcycle, you know, and the air was blowing the hair on my skin, you know, except I mean my car was the top up, you know, but every cell in my skin is just buzzing, you know, and it's just delightful, you know, and I just giggle all the way home, you know, and that was.
Every time you left, it was that?
Yeah, for the first year. I mean, I'd go sit with Robert, and he was specifically raising my level of vibration, you know, is what I know now. He was lifting me and lifting me and lifting me, and every time I was in his presence, you know, I'd come out and I'd just buzz, you know.
I don't buzz when I do this. Yeah, I mean, I feel completely, I guess that's what you say when you go to a movie and all these better afterwards, and you know.
That's what it is. Oh, but Robert was. Robert, yeah. Robert was quite an awesome presence, you know. Robert was a very awesome presence, you know. In fact, this went on for, I would say, roughly a year, and then one day it didn't happen. And it was really quite disappointing, but you know the adjustment has been made. Now at the level where I no longer experience the change because that level of vibration was normal for me then, you know. But I was with that guy a lot. I was with him every second I could be with him. I'm feeling the buzz right now. Yeah.
Yeah, when I would walk into the room with Robert, or when he would walk in, because we'd be in there first, I would notice that all of a sudden this incredible joy, and this huge smile just came with just his consciousness walking in the room. It was not a physical, it was like but I guess you try to term it emotional thing, but it's not that, it's just good.
And I feel that too. You know, I was at one of these Nam-myoho Renge Kyo chanting groups, and you know, and I went to see what it was like. A lady actually invited me to go with her, and I thought she was interested. And I thought that would be fun, and I went, you know, and it was sort of cheerleadery, and you know, and you know, the testimonials and cheerleading and such like, you know, but the chanting was good, you know, and any chanting is high, right? So it was sort of high. And all of a sudden, whoa, what's that? You know, and I looked around, and then this little bald-headed guy is walking in through the door, you know, and what they've been doing was killing time with for this guy to get there. And I felt him walking the room. Whoa, what's that? You know, and he came up, and the room goes, and it focuses, and the chanting goes way up, you know, and then it was a kick, you know, and it was just joyful. So, you know, there are certainly people like that. Father Keating does the same thing. The Catholic centering prayer guy, well, you know, he's been doing it for 60 years. You know, and you know it works. But, I'm sort of killing time. I don't think I want to start self-inquiry until we decide what we're going to do, because I think self-inquiry and the awareness exercise are things that we'd like to do in a separate week each time. What's your guys' sense? You want to go on?
Yes.
You want to get?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the meditation, like when this class started, was just kick-ass. Like, we could have stayed in that meditation for even longer. I don't know. It felt really good. I thought
it felt really high too.
All right, let me think of it. Maybe got rid of the riffraff. I don't know.
I did feel a little last week, but that was just my perception. I don't know.
Yeah,
No, but the week before that was very few people. And even today, when we're a few, it's still pretty high.
Yeah, the energy is a lot better today than it was last week. Last week was a lot of people were. There was very little energy. We were just getting through it.
You know what came to me was, you know, when you asked earlier, like, with more people at odds that against us? Like, when I come in here, I become aware that there's all these people who know this truth that hit me like a ton of bricks about 4 months ago. I was suddenly sitting someplace and I went, oh my God, all there is what is and what appears to be. Like it hit me, and it's been with me ever since then. And it comes up over and over and over and over. Every time some appearance comes in, I get uncomfortable, and I hear this in my head. All there is what is and what appears to be. And I can say that here. And every single person is like, like they're having that same. And when I leave here, I'm aware of this community of people that all know that. And I don't feel like a minority anymore. I don't feel like, oh my gosh, why aren't more people doing this? I don't, you know what I mean? All I'm aware of is I'm immersed in it. And I do feel really high. And I do feel really energized in my heart.
Well, no, you say that so clear. And I guess, like, what is never changes. Right?
All there is what is, and here's to be. And like you said about, all I have to do is become aware of what is. And then I can say, is that so? So what appears to be? And then there's no reaction. It doesn't make any difference what the appearance is.
That's the point.
It doesn't make any difference what the judgment would be. And I don't even have to consciously not judge it. It's a non-issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, one person saying that makes the whole 4 months worthwhile.
Yeah.
I'm saying.
What got me high last week was when you said when there is, I think this is what you said, where there's no I, there's no me. And that just hit me, stayed with me practically all over the long, sort of danced around it. Amazing. Kind of like wherever two or more are gathered. Here we are.
Well, let's do self-inquiry next.
Yeah.
Let's do that, because that's a fun one. I think what we want to do to get the energy back up is to get a bit more focused on topics and read less and talk more. So let's try that.
In flashcards?
Same flashcard.
For
this whole section.
And that helps, because all there is what it is and what it appears to be.
Can you shorten it to, as you said last week.
What? No, shorten it to,
When you're lead, you can say, oh, well.
It's not it's
You know that I have a friend who always will tell me about something and then she'll go, isn't that interesting? And I always think of Robert saying, become interested in yourself. In my mind I always say, no, that's not interesting.
not at all.
That's all interesting does not interest me. Because if you answer yes, then your mind has 70 things to say about it. And if you answer no,
Yep.
That becomes the barometer. It's almost to say, however you want to answer the question is will this generate more thinking, or will this quiet my mind? Really?
See, I had a great gift from Osho. He just looked me dead in the eye and he said, every time I answer a question, your mind generates 10 more questions. And I just saw that. And he smiled and said, I'm not here to answer your questions. I'm here to get you to stop asking questions. But of course, he answered all the questions there were in order as part of that process. But the point is that the mind has to run down. And my experience is that it has to run down. You just pull your energy away from it and let it go.
That's the glass. I like that.
Oh yeah, if you've got a friend and you start ignoring your friend, they'll walk away, right? I mean, if anybody that you're hanging out with, if you stop responding to them and stop reacting to them and stop speaking to them and stop answering them and stop listening to them and stop doing anything with them, they'll desert you.
The moment I stopped, that's been beginning to happen with old friends. And the minute I stopped feeling guilty about it, about not I have a feeling that I'm not going to feed into their drama. I don't really want to do it. But the moment I really stop feeling guilty about it, they're gone. I don't care if he calls me anymore. I'm not interested anymore. And when I feel that and thought that, he never calls me. It's okay. I mean,
could you use that with maybe with school and stuff? Like, say you're I'm a sociology major. All I'm learning is and I'm trying to look at it and say, that's so. Well, this is how we see it, and this is how it is, and the humanness of it. Mm-hmm. But it's, trying to separate, I don't know, but then not see it as a problem, so I can continue going too and writing the papers and stuff.
You have to learn. Your job there is to learn the material so you can parrot it back. But you don't have to buy it.
But sometimes I can feel so drained after a class, and if it's just taken, I don't know, everything out of me. I don't know. Maybe it's just my interpretation of it, my perception of that.
No, either.
It's not the same thing in order to give a medication to help somebody get well. I mean, I'm not going to say, they don't really need to stand by on it. There was no person there.
They do need it, don't they?
Yeah, apparently. Well, from where they are and at that point in their consciousness, they do.
Jesus has suffered to be so now.
Right.
Suffering meaning allowed, not suffering meaning Buddhist type suffering. Let it be that way for now.
David Hawkins talks a lot about that in that Eye to Eye book.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about, he was a big psychiatrist, had his massive practice and everything, and his big awakening after his little enlightenment experience or whatever is, all they need is love.
Right.
So, they think they're there to pass out drugs, but you're there just to love and see the truth.
And that's why I love it, because when I'm in there hanging their IV, it's I'm talking to them and I'm seeing them also these tubes coming out of their bodies,
And what difference does it make what you're doing while you're loving them?
Right. It doesn't make any difference. Cutting their hair, hanging their IV, teaching them, whatever. It's irrelevant.
And if it's all a Leelaa, if their disease is nonsense, if it's all a Leelaa, so is the medicine.
Yeah, it's just a role.
Part of the Leelaa.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And Joel is so clear about that. And Barbara is also that way. She says, Joel says, first of all, that our work is preventative, not fixative. Mm-hmm. So you should be doing your daily practice so that you don't experience these diseases. But if you experience these problems, get over it, get past it, get through it. Do what you need to do to get through it, so that it doesn't take you away from your work. And Joel told Barbara to, use medical services on several occasions when healings didn't seem to be working. Take her to the doctor, Take her to the doctor,
So when I got the stomach flu really bad, said, well, have you gone to the doctor? Yes. Are you on antibiotics? Yes. Have you called your adultery? No. And so it was do all of, it doesn't mean that, I'm laying there playing a sweet temperature. It doesn't mean, there is no temperature. Is what I mean. But then I also called, and then, it was weird. It's I remember I called you, so I never called you for any kind of healing. And I said, I'm really sick, and you're you're calling for healing. I said, yeah. He said, okay, so I'm waiting for you to do something. Hello? And you're okay. I said, okay, bye. You go, bye. And I was really disappointed. And then the next thing I knew, a few hours later, it wasn't I kept waiting to feel better. All of a sudden, 2 hours later, I realized I didn't feel like shit anymore. It's when I come to, I realized, I've been silent all that time,
And that's the way it works.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
And you can do it the other way around next time.
Yeah.
Call first.
Yeah. Now that I have that experience,
You can call first and then go to the doctor.
There you go. It's the very last case.
Joel talks about what would have been a problem if he was a professional healer. I think people sent him lots of gifts as a result of his healing, but he wasn't having accounts receivable. He didn't do that. But he said the problem is that, he'll see somebody a month later and say, oh, well, how's that leg? And I'll say, what leg?
Wow.
And, the fact is that with Joel, they listen to, what you do is you get lifted to the altitude where it never happened, right?
Wow.
They got lifted to the altitude that it never happened. They I remember it. They forgot that they had the problem. Forgot that that was the dream.
Just thinking of the Jared Gloria.
Yeah, or the money. It's hard to collect money when the guy didn't remember he had a leg. Or whatever. He talks about that. That's healing. Right out of the problem. The problem never happened. It is.
Good point.
Okay, thank you for coming. I love you all. See you next week.